You can see my screen, right? Desktop. Can you see the screen, guys?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, let's start. So last time, by the time we stopped, we were talking about the real-time deployment steps, especially the one related to clearing the cache. So in real time, even though you can actually deploy from console theoretically, but because of the traces that will be left out of the old version, usually in all real-time deployments, when you take because you take a downtime, you shut down the servers, and the most important thing you perform is cache clearing. So this will ensure that there are no traces of the old application available anywhere in your WebLogic. Then you deploy a new version. So obviously you cannot clear the cache while the servers are running, so you stop the servers. So before you stop the servers, you theoretically remove the application, which means you undeploy the application from console. Then you stop the domain, because the domain stopping is not really necessary here. You can actually stop manage servers alone, that's sufficient. But admin also we stop because anyway you are stopping, so you would like to clean up the admin also. So you do a restart of the admin also because you got a chance. Then the cache clearing happens. You will clear the cache temp and if possible the stage directory also if it is there. Then you start the admin server. You deploy the application using one of these things, and then you can start the managed servers. Alright. So the deployment, if you remember, we have passed a couple of commands last time. We noted down those commands. So we have actually given, you clicked on install, then you selected the source, then you selected whether it's a application or a library, then you selected the targets, then the optional settings like name, security related thing, and then stays, no stays, external stays. These are the inputs that you have given to the installer. So you have given during the installation when you're doing it through the console. The same inputs will go to any other type of tool. Let's say you take the command line tools. The command line tools, we have Java WebLogic.deployer, then you have AND tool, then you have WL list. Let's go back and see the command line tools. What is stopping domain? It's like stopping admin, and yeah, that's correct, Kishore. Stopping domain is a generic word. The specifics you perform is you stop the admin, you stop the managed servers, then you stop the admin. Yeah. So let's look at other forms of deployment, kind of other tools for deployment. We've been doing using console, or the same thing can be done using WebLogic.deployer and scripts or WLS. We will see this one. This is because this is the most popular one for now. The rest of the things you can pretty much gather on your own. Or else for the AND, probably I'll prepare an additional video and give it to you guys. There's no point in discussing it again and again. We will see. We'll see if we want to discuss here itself. Well, let's look at Java WebLogic.deployer. Now the Java WebLogic.deployer it takes the same inputs as the console, the same set of inputs. So I'm going to write the code and execute this Java WebLogic.deployer here. So I'm on our cloud server. Logic Online, Oracle, middleware. Oh, what's happening? Middleware is a project. Domains encode demo. I think I had to remove that sound. Okay, I'm going to start the admin server first, then write the script to deploy. tail-f admin.log. Spelling mistake. Alright, so our admin server is up, running on the port number 192.168.128.6 with 20,001. Alright, now let's write a script. Now I'm going to call it deploy.sh. I'll just open up that script and just write Java WebLogic.deployer. First connect to the admin server. Admin URL 192.168.128.6, username WLS admin, password WLS admin. You're going to give the same set of inputs like this. Alright, so you can say deploy source, wherever is your source. All our sources we have put into a common location. Open another session here and code 123. Let's go to that location. We have put all our files into this location. Deploy files. Let's try it starting with JSF. So our source location is this thing with this var file. So this is the location. Deploy files JSF-1.2.var. Then let's give the rest of the parameters. So install is what we are calling deploy. Source we have given. Application or a library. Now if it is a library, you will give a library. If it is not a library, you don't give anything, because if you don't give anything, it's considered to be an application. And once you're given that library, then give the targets. So targets, let's give the targets mng1, encode mng2, encode mng3, encode mng4. All the targets where you want this one to be deployed. Then name security stays -name JSF security you can use as default -stays if this is what you want. Now this is a simple Java WebLogic.deployer command with all the inputs. Now when you execute this one, let's try to execute. Save it, close it. If you execute it directly, you see this error, permission denied. What is this problem? Anybody? Or do we get rid of this problem? 755, that's correct. So normally if you see, it says permission denied, right? So let's see the permissions, current permissions, why it's saying denied. ls-l will give you the permissions. For example, if you see here, you got read write permissions but no execute permission, but you are trying to execute the script. That's why it's saying permission denied. So what we're going to do is we're going to give the execute permissions to the script, and to give those permissions we're going to use chmod 755 deploy.sh. Now check the permissions again. You should have the execute permissions. Alright, earlier they were not there. So now that you have the execute permissions, execute the script. You see, it throws out an error, could not find or load the main class WebLogic.deployer. This is the class we are trying to execute using the Java command, if you remember. Let me do a cat on this command. Cat. So here, Java WebLogic.deployer. It's saying I can't find WebLogic.deployer. So Java command is trying to find a class called WebLogic.deployer, and when you run the script, it could not find it. Now the reason it could not find is there is no class path defined here. If you see on this terminal, the class path is empty. Normally Java command uses this class path variable and all the jars inside the class path to find out the classes. I think we have discussed it during server startup. The difference between path and class path. Path is for a shell, so that shell can understand where a command is, or shell can search for the location of a command. Whereas class path is for this Java program. The JVM, that's what we call. A JVM searches through the class path to find out any class that you are trying to execute. Now in this case, the class path is empty. That's why it could not find the main class. Now all that we have to do is set up this class path. Now the easiest way to set up a class path is by setting up the environment here. Under domain home bin, this is very important. Remember this thing, guys. Again and again we're going to go do this thing. Under domain home bin, we have a file domain environment.sh or set domain env.sh. This script basically sets up every parameter for a domain. For example, echo middleware home for this domain. The same way, echo domain home. All these things are not set at this point because after we run that script, these things will be set. For example, Java home, which is not set. Java home. This will be set. The same way, class path, the one that we are looking for. All these settings will be set the moment you execute a set domain env. Let's do that. / means in the current directory there is a file execute. I have executed it. Then what should have happened? Echo middleware home. It was not set. Why? I have executed the script and I told this is going to set all these parameters, but it did not. Why do you think it did not set the parameter? You see, nothing was set, but we have executed the command. Yeah, it needs to set something. Why it did not set anything? Update the file with other environment location. You mean we have to change the set domain anyway? No, that's not correct. Any other ideas why this was not set? These variables are already set in here. The variables are already there in set domain anyway. But still, after execution, it did not set. I'll tell you the reason why it did not set anything. Export. Yes, that's a possibility. The actual reason why it did not set anything is Normally when you run a script in Unix, any script, what happens is it executes a shell shell. So what you are doing is you are in a white screen, which is a bash shell, alright, and then you are executing set domain env, which gets executed in a shell shell. So here the shell shell is where the set domain env gets executed. Alright. Now when the shell shell executes these things, alright, this is called forking operation. So a shell, parent shell basically forks a child shell. A child shell executes the command. Now this is what you've done here. You have executed set domain env, which means the script actually did set all your parameters that you asked for. MW home, class path, then your Java home. It did set everything. There was no mistake from the script itself. But the problem is, because it was executing in a child shell, the moment it set everything, it actually exited from this child shell, which means the child shell was terminated. Its job is done. So this is gone. It's not there anymore. Once the set domain env finish, that's why now then what you are doing, you're coming here and you are saying echo $class path. Obviously you're not going to see anything because class path was never set in this shell. Class path was set in a child shell, and the child shell exited the moment it finished its processing set domain env. So your variables were set but not in the current shell. They were set in a child shell. Now to avoid that, or what we want actually is, we want these variables to be set in the current shell, means your bash white screen. Now the way to do it is, you have to tell the bash shell not to create a child shell for this set domain env, but do it in the current shell itself. And the way to do it is, you're going to say dot space. The dot space, the dot first dot before any command tells, do not create a child, run it in the current shell. Then I'm saying, so the dot space is current shell, then I'm saying the path of that file name, set domain env.sh. So here in this case, if you say that there is a very important point here. So here the first dot is of importance. The first dot basically tells current, excuse me, the first dot basically tells the current shell. The second dot has no meaning, or it's not much significant because the second dot is simply path of the file. The second dot tells you the path is in the current directory. The first dot says do not create a child shell or run the command in the current shell itself. Now if you do that, all these parameters will be set in the current shell and you will be able to see an echo command. Alright? So that's usually called sourcing an environment. So all that we have to do here is run it in the current shell, dot space dot slash set domain env. Now that you have executed, you will be able to check everything else. Echo this thing. Now you see the middle pair home is set. Now echo class path. This is a class path. Everything set. Domain home. Echo domain home. Domain home is set. So all the variables are actually set, but if you are trying to set them in the current path or the current shell, you have to tell that it's in the current shell. Dot space dot slash set domain env. The first dot is of the importance here, the most important one. Current shell. Second dot is current directory. Now once you have set it, now you are ready to run your command. No, we don't follow it for all executions, because all other executions you don't mind running it in the current, in a child shell. You don't follow it in child shell. Normally what you do is you define a variable and you export it. That way it's available everywhere. So you are defining the variable in the current shell and exporting it to the child shells. So when you need something in the current shell itself, and if that has to be set by a child process, that's not possible. That's when you do a sourcing the environment. This is another command that probably you will be using. Source set domain env. A lot of people use this one. So if you do is bin source set domain env. This is exactly same thing as dot space dot slash. Sourcing is you're setting it in the current shell. Some people do use source, but the source command is not available on all Unix systems, whereas the dot space dot slash is universal. It works on any Unix system. So some of you may be familiar with source command. So that might not work everywhere, but the dot space dot slash works on any Unix systems. So that's something that you should use. Alright. So once the setup is done, now you are ready. Basically, once you have set up the class path, and you should be able to execute your deploy script. So now let's execute the deploy script. Something is wrong with the syntax. Unrecognized flag username. I gave a spelling mistake. It's user name. Deploy files, open it and correct it. Admin URL username. Save it, close it. Now run it again. Something wrong again. 192.168.128.6 is not a valid URI. Host port, I think we missed the port number. Open it again. Yeah, admin URL is wrong. 20,001. Now let's run it again. Now it's working. Something else. Password wrong. WLS admin failed to authenticate. Password wrong. What was our password? 123. 123. WLS admin 123. Reply.sh. This time it looks good. So remember, none of our servers are actually up, the targets. If the no targets are available, what will be the state of the application? We've seen it last time. Deployment successful but no targets available. What will be the state of the application? How many states of the application we have seen? No, it's not going to be prepared. Not even standby. It's new. That's correct. It's new. It's new. Deployment successful, no targets available. So the state of your application is going to be new. Okay, the deployment is done actually. But you will see a remote exception. This is not an exception, this is more like an information. See what it says. Basically, this is where we have executed the command deploy.sh. It initiated everything with your admin URL, username, password, with all the values that you have given. Then it started deploying Alright, so see this one. Initializing deploy operation for the application JSF. Then the remote exception is none of these are available. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then what it did was it simply deploy deferred, means the deployment is postponed on these targets. Postponed is not an error, it's simply postponed. When they become available, the deployment will be completed and the application will become active on those servers. So here, this is something that you will see, remote exception if the targets are not available. If you don't want to see this exception, just bring up the manage servers or the targets before you do a weblogic.deployer command. Alright, now that this is deployed, we can actually go into the console and see whether it's deployed or not. Let's see 192.168.128.6 20,001 /console WLS admin 123. And if you go into deployments, everything is there already. Let me undeploy it. Then how come it deployed? Delete. It's not supposed to deploy, it's supposed to throw out an error saying the application already exists. So I removed everything. Now let me do a deployment. Now that it's done again, let's go back to console, refresh this page. Now you see this thing. Now the same way I can write the script for the rest of the archives also. I'm going to quickly edit my script, deploy.sh. Alright, the same 4 or 5 things that I'm going to execute. Now, but before I do that, I will simply modify this script just to make it a generic one. So domain home equal to my domain home. Students WebLogic online or Students WebLogic online Oracle middleware user projects domains and code domain. This is my domain home. So I'm going to use this one in the script, domain home. Then I'll say cd domain home bin dot space dot slash set domain env dot sh. So I will do this setup in the script itself. It will be easy. Now I'm executing Java command for JSF. The same Java command I'm going to execute for the rest of the 4 archives also. I'm going to copy paste this line 4 more times. So YY 2 3 4. So let's modify it a little bit. Alright. So I have 5 lines total. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For 5 applications. So let's modify it according to our requirement. The first one is JSF. I'm going to leave it. Come to the second one. So what are the things I need to change? Admin URL will remain same, username will remain same, password, deploy, source will change. What else will change? Source has changed. Name will change. That's correct. Name will change. JSTL. The same way for the third application, Admin URL, username, password will remain same. Source will change again. So the file name is going to be medrac.ar file this time. And this is not a library, so we're going to remove this library tag. Targets will remain same. Name will change again. Medrac. Alright. The next one. Follow the cursor. When I'm working, I'm actually talking about the location of the cursor. Follow the cursor. Admin URL will remain same. Username, password will remain same. Deploy. Source will change again here. So let's change the name. Physician.ar file. This is also not a library, so remove it. Targets are going to remain same. Name will change. Physician. The same way finally, admin URL, username, password will be same. Source will change to Medrac browser starter. Browser starter.var. This is also not a library, so remove this tag. Targets name is browser starter. That's it. The rest of the parameters will remain same. So save it, close it. You're ready to run it. The first application will fail because it already existed. So this one, browser starter does not exist. starter. So I made a spelling mistake here. Source, browser starter, starter. Targets, name of the application. Now we're going to run it again. Even though application exists, it's again still deploying. It's ideally it should throw an error, but it does tell you that it's deferred. See, normally what happens is because this application already exists, JSF, JSL, all those things, it should give you an error, but here it's taking the existing one and it's actually deploying. So if you go to the console, reload the page, you got pretty much everything. Now if you start one of the servers, the state of this application will change from new to active. So all these applications will be changed from new to active. Let's start one of the managed servers. Start mng1.sh. Look at the log file. Once it comes up, the state of the application will be active. So while this comes up, let's write a script for undeploying similar. So this is what we have used to create, or this is our script for deploying the application. Now you can write the same script for undeploying. So only thing that's going to change is the order of these lines. Because you have deployed JSFs first, you need to undeploy them last. So your undeployment order is going to be reverse of this deployment. Whatever you have used to deploy, the order for your undeploying, it's going to be reverse. So I'm going to take a copy of this file into undeploy and make the slide modifications. Undeploy. So the first three lines will remain same. Domain home, cd to domain home bin set. Then instead of, so here username, password, instead of deploy, you're going to give undeploy. Alright, and undeploy command does not take all these parameters. All that it requires is the name of the application. So you have to give just the name of the application. It gets undeployed. So I'm going to modify this thing and then order. So undeploy, remove everything. Name GSTL. Next line, deploy, change it to undeploy, change the name, remove everything else. Just give the name, remove everything else. Next line, everything will remain same. Deploy will change to undeploy, remove everything else except the name. So change deploy to undeploy, remove everything else except the name. Once you have done that, you need to change the order because you want to undeploy browser starter first, then physician, then medrec, then GSTL, GS. Means the order has to be reversed. So I'm going to cut paste these lines in proper order. So that's browser starter, GSF, final, GSTL, yeah. I did a DD and paste in VI. So browser starter is what is going out first. Physician will go next, medrec will go next, GSTL, and finally GSF. Alright. Once that's done, save it, close it. Your undeploy script is ready. Before we undeploy, let's reload this page. All of them should be inactive. These are all in active state. See, the warning signal is a known problem, so you can ignore it, especially in the practice lab. So here, because one of the servers or one of the targets is available now, all the apps are in active state. Now you will be able to access the medrec page on all the targets, manage server 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now the same way that we have deployed using a script, we can actually undeploy also. So we have created an undeploy script with these 5 entries. Let's execute. So browser starter is getting undeployed, then physician, medrec, GSTL, GSF, undeploy completed. Go to the console, reload this page, everything gone. So deploy, undeploy. These are the two operations you've seen. The same way, there's another operation called listing the apps. So list apps simply list the contents of your domain or the apps deployed to your domain. So this is what you need to do. Undeploy.sh, let's say, list apps.sh. Open up. The only change that you need to do is connect to the admin URL. Use username, password. Instead of undeploy, here you're going to say list the applications for me. It takes no parameters at all. You're simply trying to list all the applications. So that's a single command. It will list out all the applications deployed to your domain. Save it, close it, run list apps. It will list the application. There is no application to list. Now let's say we deploy it. Then run list apps. Right, now deployed, let's run list apps. Let's say you don't have console at this point. You're trying to do everything on command prompt. So you deploy it, now you want to list the applications. See, the number of applications found is 5. So you got GSF, GSTL, Physician, Medtrack, and Browser Start. So the list tabs. These are the 3 applications, the commonly used commands with WebLogic.deploy. Now the same things can be done using AND or WLST. Using both of them, it's possible. We're not going to get into each type of these things. What I will do is for the AND based, at least it will be helpful. I'm going to create a video and give it to you guys, just the video part. The process is going to remain same. You're going to pass the same set of parameters like this, and the ones that you passed to WebLogic.deploy it to the AND script also. So WLST is not really used anywhere, but you will still be able to do WLST when we actually talk about WLST. WLST deployment is not that really difficult. It's easy that now that you know WebLogic.deploy, you will also know the AND, and WLST is something that can be performed outright. So that's a command line. The AND script and based deployment, I'll give it to you probably by tomorrow. Just upload the video. That's going to be a 30 minutes video, so you will know the basics of AND and how to execute AND script, how deployment gets done using AND. That's something that I'm going to record. So the next thing, so these are the tools. So we talked about admin console to deploy. We talked about Java WebLogic.deploy. You're going to see using AND, but these are only tools to do the deployment. The actual deployment process itself is the one that we talked. This thing. This is the process. The tool is only coming into picture at the first step, where you are stopping and deleting the application, and the last step, where you are deploying the application using one of the tools. Whereas the process itself is a more important one, that you stop the service and you clear the cache. That's the most important part of the entire deployment. Alright, so this is what we talked about so far in deployment. Last session and this session is the practical thing. This is what you will need to perform in a real-time project. Apart from what we have seen so far, there are certain other things that you will require from a theoretical concept, especially for the interview perspectives. So we're going to see those theoretical concepts now. So this is all going to be theory. Now let's see the types of deployments. What you have seen so far are the tools for the deployment. Console is a tool. WebLogic.deploy is a tool. AND is a tool. WLST is a tool. Now what we are trying to talk about is the forms, means how many types of deployments are there. And the first type is what we've been looking at. Archived format means you will get everything in EARs and WAR files. You deploy it. But is it mandatory to get everything in EARs and WARs? Means does WebLogic mandate that, or is it required that you get the files or the code in WARs and EARs? Is there any other way that you can get the code and deploy it? Do you think archiving is mandatory to deploy to WebLogic? Some of you are saying yes and others are saying no. Archiving is not mandatory. WebLogic does not say anything about archive the code and then only you can deploy. WebLogic allows both kinds of deployments. You can get an archive, or the second form of deployment, exploded form, is where you don't archive anything. Let's say you are a developer, you are developing the code. When you are developing the code, everything is in a directory structure, one directory inside the other. At that point, if you want to deploy, there should not be any need to archive it. So WebLogic allows the deployment of the code all this time. The volume was mute. Does that mean our audio is not going to have volume? Let's see. Maybe we'll have some problem with the audio. So the explode form. So coming back here, all this time we've been doing with archive, but WebLogic does not require that you archive it. It also allows what's called an exploded form, means without archiving, without bundling, you can still deploy the application. So let's go ahead and quickly do that kind of deployment. For example, if you take one of our archives, let's say pick up one of our archives, let's say browser start. We will extract it into a directory, temp directory. Copy the browser starter to a temp directory. Oops. Copy, it created a file last time. cd temp, extract it, jar xvf browser start, jar command not found. Let's set Java home. Now the easiest way Java home set is, I'm going to set it from my set domain env.sh. That's what I usually do. Any parameter I want to set, I simply source it from set domain env. User projects, domains, and code daemon pin. Alright, now dot space dot slash set domain. What's the first dot? What's the first dot? First dot, guys. It's not source, it's the current shell. Current shell, that's correct. The first dot is current shell. So let's get into temp again. Now I have a jar xvf browser start. Let's say I'm a developer. I remove this browser start. Now I'm simply developing a code. Alright. Now my code is actually spread into these two directories. Web.xml is where the deployment descriptor is there. Web.xml. Alright. Everything else is inside. You can actually see the contents of this directory using this command. Find dot star, so it will give out everything in the order. This is directory under classes, com, ba, medrec, utils, browser starter dot class. This is where you have everything. Now I have my code in exploded form. I did not archive anything. Now I can actually deploy this directory temp to my WebLogic. WebLogic detects a web inf file and a web.xml inside it. It will allow you to select this directory and deploy it. Let's go ahead and deploy it from console. I want to see, reload this. Let's say I undeploy all of them from my let's say I undeploy everything using the script. Undeploy done. Go to console, reload this page, everything gone. Now we are going to deploy not in the archived format but in exploded format. And my exploded form of code is available under the temp location. This is where I put the code. So lock and edit, install. See this one. Earlier we have selected the var files. Now you are given a choice to select a directory. It automatically detects the directory temp because the temp directory has webinf inside it. The moment it sees a webinf, WebLogic will detect that this directory can be deployed. So temp directory can be selected. You can actually move on and proceed with the rest of the things. The rest of the things are going to remain same. They don't change. The only thing is your source, instead of a var file or er file, this time it was simply a directory. And this form of deployment is called exploded form of deployment. Normally when you deploy exploded format, especially for an ER file, we know that ER file is a combination of vars and jars. So if you want to deploy an ER file in exploded format, everything has to be in exploded. Means you cannot keep a jar inside and then some classes and try to deploy. So you cannot have any type of archive in exploded form. Everything has to be unjarred or untarred. So exploded form is complete file by file, directory by directory, without any archives. And WebLogic allows both type of deployments. Apart from this archive exploded format, there is another type of deployment called hot deployment. Hot deployment is basically an update command. If you see here, let's say now you have deployed everything, go into deployments. Now you want to change this thing. Let's say you are a developer, you made some changes to the class here. Alright, you are working in temp, so let's say here you made some changes to this class. Alright, you compiled it again, so the class is fresh with the same name. The name is same, but the code inside had changed. Now this code is already deployed to WebLogic, which means the code is already in the JVM. When you do a ps-ef grep java, so you have the code in the JVM, but the code that was on the hard disk has changed. Now you want to load the new code from hard disk to the process JVM. So obviously one way to do it is you can undeploy and deploy it again, or else WebLogic provides you what is called an update command. This update is nothing but hot deployment. Means it's hot. You don't delete it and then redeploy it. You take this application, you simply ask WebLogic to update it, so it goes to the hard disk, picks up the new code, deploys it again. No, we don't have to be in development mode for exploded format. Just now we did it's in production mode. Our servers are in production mode. We did an exploded form of deployment. What you are asking is auto deployment. If you want auto deployment, we have to be in development mode. That's this one. It's coming up later. Exploded form, archive form, hot deployment, these all can be done in any mode. So hot deployment is nothing but you change the code at hard disk level. You go to the console or you go to a command prompt. You simply say update my application. When you say update my application, WebLogic actually picks up the code from the same location that you have overwritten and then loads it into the JVM. It's called hot deployment. Apart from this, there is an auto deployment. Auto deployment. Now auto deployment here is automatic deployment. Now for example, this is especially the automatic deployment is for developers. What WebLogic says is you don't have to manually give all these parameters that you are giving. You see? So what it says is you take up a file, copy it into the directory. And what directory we are going to be copying it into? You will copy it into You will copy it into domain home auto deployed directory. What it says is anything you copy inside it automatically gets deployed. You can copy a var file into this directory. You can copy an entire exploded form of directory into this directory. Whatever you copy in here, it gets deployed automatically. If you remove that, it gets undeployed. It's pretty simple. Copy, remove for deployment and undeployment. Let's quickly see one of those things. Now, the main required thing for auto deployment is that your servers should be in development mode. This feature is available only in development mode. So our servers are currently in production mode. So if you take, for example, our server, go to the location, Oracle middleware user project, domains, encode daemon. If you go to the bin, look at the log files, admin.log, go to the end of the log file. Just before the server starts up, it's going to tell you what mode it's running in. Somewhere here. See this thing. Started WebLogic admin server, the admin server name for this domain in production mode. It has to be development mode if we want to run auto deployment. The first thing we're going to do is I need to convert my domain from production to development mode. So, and that obviously cannot be done dynamically. We're going to shut down the servers, make the changes, and then restart the servers. But before we go there, on console there is something called, you go into that name of the domain, see production mode enabled true. This is another way of checking whether production mode is enabled or not, but sometimes this may not be accurate, so it's always better you check it at the log level. So when you look at the log, if you see that your servers are running in production mode or development mode, that's actually true. Whereas from console also, see, logged into console, click on the name of the domain, configuration, general configuration, production mode. It says true, means you are in production mode. Now we want to convert into from production mode to development mode, and the way you do it is, so let's kill the servers first. We're going to change the config.xml. We'll have to remove an entry from config.xml. Yes, FNAF for Java. Admin and manage servers. I'm killing both. Alright, let's go to the config.xml. Config. Take a backup before you make any changes to that. Always take backups, guys. So open it up, search for production. You see this line here, production mode enable, it says true. Ideally you can convert it into a false thing and it should move to development mode, but it does not. You have to actually remove this line, then only your servers will be moved into development mode. So I'm going to remove this line, remove, save it, close it, exit. So now I don't have any production mode enabled true line in my config.xml. Now I'm going to start my server. So how did we change from production to development mode? We removed the entry from config.xml. That's how you change from production to development. What about the other way? Means from development to production. That I will show you. Obviously you can make that entry back. That's one way, but there is an easier way to do that. So We have changed from production to development now by removing the entry in the config.xml. Now let's start the servers. So cd to bin start admin.sh. Look at the log file. Now see, it did not change. See this thing? Started WebLogic server in production mode only. It's still in production mode. We want this to be in development mode. Let's check the config.xml again. It's not that. It's still coming as production. Let's replace the backup. And let's say instead of true, we're going to say false. Let's try this one also. Sometimes this happens. There are multiple ways of doing this thing, especially from move to production to development. One way that we do is we remove that entry. It did not happen. Then I'm testing the second way. So I kept the entry, but I changed it to false. So let's say we kill it, start it again. Sorry, kill -9, process it. This is the second way I'm doing. Keep the entry, change it to false. Restart the servers. It did not change. If it did not change, you have to go with the last records. That's a sure short way. You're going to add an additional parameter to your Java options. So here you have the Java options, right? -d parameters. You're going to add an additional D parameter. So you will say -d production mode enabled. You see this thing? This parameter? That's the reason it's picking up. WebLogic dot production mode enabled equal to true. So you need to change it to false. -d production mode enabled equal to false. You change this thing. Now where is this parameter defined? Where is the possibility? Can you guess it? It's a parameter relative to the domain. So ideally, what's the location? WebLogic.jar? No. WebLogic.jar is a common file for all the domains of a BA home. This is domain specific setup. So it should be in somewhere in domain related files. So what do you think is the file that may have this parameter? Any guesses, guys? We want to see where this parameter is set. We can find out, we will find out, but any guesses? That's correct. Set domain env. It's most likely going to be in set domain env. It is in set domain env actually. Alright. So I'm going to search through the set domain env and then change it from true to false. So let's try to just grab it. That's easy way. Production mode enable. So I'm going to do a grep production mode enable from set domain env.sh. You see? It's somewhere here. Somewhere. So we're going to open this file, set domain env, go to this location, change it to false. So I'll take a backup before I change it. Set domain env, set domain env -bkp. Open that file now, set domain env. Search for production mode enable. search for that line. This line is what you're going to search for. So this is where it is. Alright. So here it actually goes with a variable. Production mode is true. Now probably this variable is set somewhere. So I'm going to search for that variable. Or an easier way would be to set it to false here. So this is what I'm going to do. Export production underscore mode equal to false. That's an easy way. You don't have to make it to false. The reason is it's making it to true only if the production mode parameter is true. So I'm setting this production mode parameter to false. So this if statement is never going to be executed. Alright? Or else you can actually change this one. Either way it's okay. So we have changed production mode equal to false. So save it, close it. Now kill your server, restart it. Excuse me. Yes, FNEF graph for Java. Now start the server. Start admin. Tail FNF admin.log. Now the server should come up in development mode. Still in production. Means our parameter was not actually set. You see this now? Okay. I'm going to kill it again and do the hard way. Kill it. Shift insert. VI set domain anyway. Leave it. I'm going to change it to false. Save it, close it. Start your server again. That's weird. It's still in production mode. What happened to our environment variable? This is false. It's setting up true somewhere else again. You see? There's a false, then there's a true here. That's why it's setting it up again. We don't run it when you start the servers will internally call that set domain anyway. We don't have to explicitly run it. The production mode variable is getting set somewhere. This one. Let's change it to false. Kill it and restart. 4071. Start admin. This is bad. It's getting set at multiple locations. Delete all the directories. What does that mean? Why would it do it? Cache clearing. Cache clearing. I don't think it will actually help. We will try it, but see this thing here. This is the actual reason why it's not picking up. Somewhere it's still thinking a production mode enabled is true. Well, that's what I'm going to fix first. Then I'll go with your suggestion. I don't think that clearing cache has anything to do with this stuff. Production mode is false. See this thing? Production mode enabled is false. It's setting it up again somewhere. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to simplify this entire process. I will set up this variable at the very end. This is the last Java options. Beyond this, there are no Java options. So I want to set this here. False. Alright, save it, close it. See, my variable is here. Ah, so it is already running. So I'm going to kill it. 4158. Yeah, this is sure shot method. A development mode. So what I did was I practically forced the server to take that parameter that I have given. I have set it at the very end of everything. This is where I've set it. Set domain anyway. This is at the end of the file. So go to the end of the file, just above the end of the file. Go to the end of the file means you are going to use Shift G. Shift G will take you to the end of the file. So after Shift G, go a little bit above, you will find the Java options. These are the last Java options. So if you change it here, there is no chance that it's going to be modified later because there is nothing else beyond this point. So WebLogic server has to start with these parameters, and that's what I did. I put the parameter at the very end. So now my server is in development mode. Once the server is in development mode, and I am confirming it by using development mode. There's another way to confirm it. That's a less certain way. You can go into the log file, the console, WLS admin 123. It's taking this long. So we're trying to see auto deployment. So before we get into auto deployment, we try to convert our domain from production to development. And when you're doing it, you tried multiple things. One is the first thing, I tried to remove the production mode enabled tag from config.xml. That did not work. I tried to keep it same and then turn it to false. That did not work. And finally, I changed it in set domain env. In set domain env also there are multiple locations, but we changed it at the last Java options. That's when that actually when I was effective. What's happening? Okay. So here, if you see, if the production mode is not enabled, you will see this one. You will be able to select this and enable production mode. It's simple. Means if you are already in development mode and you want to convert your domain into production, it's easy. You simply go to the console and select it. So it will be production mode. But the other way around means from production to development is a little bit clumsy. So that's what we did just now. So we have converted our domain into development mode now. Now your auto deployment feature is enabled. What is auto deployment? We copy any file into auto deploy directory. It automatically gets deployed. That's the idea. So here I will copy our browser starter var archive file into auto deploy and it should ideally get deployed. So here deployments, let's say we undeploy this thing. Alright, so this is undeployed, and you must have observed one more thing. The moment we change it to development mode, there is no lock and edit anymore. The reason is it automatically acquires a lock. A development mode feature is in the preferences, it selects this parameter, automatically acquire lock and activate changes. That's the reason you won't see anything on the chain center here. This is called chain center. So the lock and edit button is not available. You can actually have lock and edit by unselecting this one, but just to make it easy, make the things easy, the lock and edit is automatic. It acquires a lock automatically. So now we have remote. So that's only in development. In production you will have lock and edit. You have to explicitly click on lock and edit to make any changes. So now we have development mode and no application running. We want to test the auto deploy feature. And how we're going to do that? We simply copy a file into auto deploy directory. Where is auto deploy directory? It's in domain home. So I'm going to copy a file into a directory. So deploy files. So this is where I am under deploy files, and this is my file browser start. I'm going to copy this file into auto deploy directory under my domain home, which is this. So in here, so copy it, auto deploy, copy it. So go to auto deploy, the file is there. Now it should have already been deployed. Go to the console, reload this page, you have this file. It's automatically deployed. You see, auto deploy, application directory, browser starter, var file, auto deploy. It's ready. Now if it is so easy that you have to simply copy a file and remove that file for undeploying, now why did we waste all this yesterday's session and today's session? To do it from console, to do it from command prompt, why did we waste it if it is so easy, if you have to simply copy a file? So why do you think the auto deploy is not something that we talked before and left everything else? This is only development mode. Yeah, you can actually put it into production also. What's the big deal? They can put it into production, right? If it is very easy. Any ideas? Any guesses? Accidentally override the stable code. Deploy to all managed servers. That's correct. But deployment components cannot be deployed in order. Yeah, why not? You copy it first and then you sleep for 1 minute and then you copy next. Order can be managed. Managed servers is one thing that you guys said. Dinesh, I think Pavitra said. Managed servers. Now here if you see, auto deployment feature, as I told you, is especially for developers because it's in development mode. So this is actually targeted to developers. The reason is auto deploy, it takes the file from the directory, auto deploy directory, and it deploys it only to admin server. If you see this one, the application target is only admin server. The targets are not even listed. And in real time, in actual non-production or production environment, you never deploy anything to admin server. It's only the developers who usually work on testing their code have a single admin server. They simply deploy it to the admin and test. So auto deploy feature, even though it's helpful, it's a nice feature to have, but it's not practically useful in a non-development environment. Apart from that, you cannot do any other customization, like you can't deploy a library. Library is something that needs little changes. Everything that you do using basically auto deploy gets deployed as a web application. So here if you take GSF for example, alright, and you want to deploy GSF as a library, that's something that we cannot do using auto deploy. So auto deploy has its drawbacks in a sense that you can't customize anything. What are the things we are trying to customize? You are trying to customize whether it's application or library. You are trying to customize the targets. You are trying to customize the name, staging mode, security level. None of these things can be done using auto deploy. All these things are automatically selected. Means it's always an application. The target is always admin server. The name is always whatever the name it chooses. Security is same. Staging is default values. So auto deploy feature, it's not suitable or not intended for a testing or a production environment. It's intended especially for developers. It's for making their life easy. So instead of archiving it or instead of deploying it manually, what auto deploy does is you simply copy the file and WebLogic will do it for you. It's as simple as it. Even in that, you still will not be able to deploy the library. So even the developers, they don't really use it. Instead, developers use uh, the Eclipse tool or GDeveloper tool, which will have a simple, nice GUI kind of thing, a drop down. You select deploy, it automatically deploys to the WebLogic server using one of the internal scripts like weblogic.deploy script. So this is more a feature and asked most of the times in interviews. And this feature is the main differentiator between development mode and production mode of WebLogic. So you will get a question, what's the difference between dev mode and production mode? This is the difference. In dev mode, you have auto deploy enabled. In production mode, you don't have it enabled. Means you will have the directory, but even if you put a file inside it, nothing really happens. So dev mode, auto deploy is enabled, and production mode, no auto deployment. So this is another type of deployment. Apart from this, obviously it has its own limitations. Auto deployment, as I was telling you, alright, you cannot deploy to any other target other than admin. You cannot change the name of the application. You cannot deploy libraries. And if it is exploded format, all the internal files need to be in explode form. That's a common requirement. What is the question? Can a dev mode admin can add manage? Yeah. Managed servers can be there. That's not a problem. But if you have managed servers, even in dev mode, you have to do the deployment in a manual way. The auto deployment cannot be used for deploying to managed servers. So these are certain other differences like between dev mode and production mode. Dev mode has auto deploy available. This is not available here. This is another important difference that you will find out. A boot.properties file is not required to start the admin server if you are in development mode, whereas boot.properties file is required in production. In production, you require boot.properties everywhere, whereas in non-production or whereas in development and mode of WebLogic, you can actually start the admin server without providing username, password, or boot.properties. Debug mode is enabled. This is not enabled anymore, so debug mode is actually not enabled. Log level is info. This is you will see in development mode little more information. That's it, but it's not debug. JDBC related, there are certain differences. We will see the differences when we talk about JDBC. Then SSL also, there are certain differences we will see. But these are all not really important things. The first two are the most important. It's auto deploy enable, you don't require boot.properties. Auto deploy not enabled, you require boot.properties. Those are the two important differences between dev mode and production mode of WebLogic domain. Apart from these things, there is another deployment here. It's called side-by-side deployment. Alright, that's usually gets asked nowadays a lot of times. Side-by-side deployment, or it's called version deployment. What it actually means is, WebLogic says it's a super good, or Oracle especially says that our WebLogic server is a super good app server that requires zero downtime, or it can maintain 100% uptime. That's what they say. Now, to sustain or to actually justify such a claim, even when you are doing a regular deployment, let's say version 1, version 2, version 1 has to be undeployed. Let's say we are not following our method, means not you don't shut down the servers, you don't clear this cache, you don't start and deploy. You're not following that. You're doing everything Oracle asks you to do. Basically, undeploy, deploy. That's it from console. Let's say. Now, even with such a deployment, the problem is the existing users will all be kicked off when you undeploy the application, and then you deploy the application. So obviously there is a theoretical gap between version 1 undeploying and version 2 deploying. Now obviously with that theoretical gap, you can't say 100% uptime. That's not possible, right? Now to claim, to justify their claim, or it works also sometimes. So to justify their claim, in 9.2 what was introduced was a side-by-side deployment. This is side-by-side, sorry. Side-by-side deployment. A side-by-side deployment is nothing but you can have two versions of the same application available at a time. Now why you want to have two versions of the application? The old version, let's say, which is in red, this will be continue to be used by the existing users. And then when you deploy a new version, the new version, any new users or any new sessions that you're that are connecting to the application server will be connected to the new version. All the old users are still connected to the old version. The moment old users get disconnected, or after a certain period of time that you define, this application, the old one, will be moved into what is called retired state. Once it is retired, you will be able to undeploy it. So what we are saying is, you keep the application running, which is red box. You deploy the new version of the same application, which is green box. Whatever was running already will continue to run. Whatever is new or whoever is connecting fresh will be connected to the new code. So WebLogic is going to maintain two code bases in that case. Old one, new one. Old ones are the ones who are already connected, who are doing their job. New sessions are the ones who are coming in new, fresh requests. So what WebLogic says is, in two scenarios we can disconnect the old guys. One is they left, means they disconnect their session, or else you give a time, means after 1 hour disconnect all these sessions from old application and retire the old application. So these two are side-by-side versions. So same application but version 1, version 2. Now to deploy such an application, both of them have to be versioned. Means you cannot have a non-versioned red one and then a versioned green one. It's not possible. So you have to define a version for the first one also, then only the second one can be deployed. Alright, so this kind of deployment is called a side-by-side deployment, and we do it using WebLogic.deployer. That's the easiest way. So I'm going to show you side-by-side deployment using WebLogic.deployer. So here, there's nothing really difficult here. You're going to add an additional tag here. So let's undeploy everything from console. Now how do I undeploy this application? This is an auto deployed application. So you go to auto deploy, you remove that browser start. That's undeploying. You go to console, reload this page, it should have gone. It's gone. So undeploying, deploying, auto deploy. Now let's do a side-by-side deployment. What we are saying is versioning, means version 1 of the application will be available, at the same time version 2 will be available. So to do that, both applications have to be versioned. So I'm going to deploy browser starter 2 times, but first time with version 1.0, second time with version 2.0. So I'm going to copy this deploy file to side-by-side .sh, modify the side-by-side .sh. So let's say I take off all these things. So WebLogic.deployer, admin, username, password, deploy, source, targets, name, stays. I'm going to give an additional parameter, app version. Let's call it 1.0. So this is the additional parameter I'm adding here. It can run in any mode. Mode is only for auto deployment. Everything else is available in both modes. It should not be a problem. So here, I'm adding an additional parameter, app version. Now once we add this app version, later I can deploy 2.0 also. So the first one is versioned application, the second one, third one can also. I can deploy the same browser var file or the same application in multiple, or at least in two. So I'm going to save it, close it, run my side-by-side deployment script. The app version is the additional tag I have added, app version. Now if I go to the console, reload it, you see my browser start is 1.0. It's in new state. So I'm going to bring up at least one managed server to convert into active state so that I can deploy the next. Otherwise it will be in new state. Both versions will be in new state. We don't want that. We want this application to be in active, and then we're going to deploy 2.0. Then this state should change from active to retired. Oracle middleware, user projects, domains, encode daemon. What's that we're trying? Start the server. Start mng1.sh. So I'm starting my server with version 1.0. So I want my application to be in active state. So I'm starting at least one target. Any questions in the meantime while this server comes up? By default, this mode will wait for dropping of all the connections before retire. Yes, that's one way of doing, or else you can specify a delay. A timeout means after 1 hour the application should retire. Sometimes what happens is your sessions will never be set, or some of the users will never really disconnect, they just leave the sessions. So in that case you need to set up a parameter here. The parameter is app version hyphen delay, I think, or app timeout something. Hold on. Where can we learn the scripting? What scripting? Just now you learned it, isn't it? Side-by-side deployment, that will be internal handling of WebLogic. WebLogic will maintain two different bases inside that cache temp directories. App version is not defined here. Java WebLogic.deployer hyphen advanced. It'll support only 2. How many versions we actually want? Why do you need 3 versions? Tell me. You see this one. This is the one. Retire timeout. I can give the timeout and it says, after this timeout it will actually automatically retire. App version hyphen retire timeout. Yeah, you have to answer that question. Why do you need 3 versions? Let's say WebLogic supports 3 versions. What's the scenario where you'll require 3 versions? Oldest users, old users, new users. That's how we want it. Yeah, we don't really require more than 2 in a real scenario. You have old users, then you have new users. That's it. And when you specify app version, you can specify the retire timeout also. After the retire timeout, even if some of the old connections exist, it will be still retired. So my managed server is up, so your application is actually in active state. Now I'm deploying version 2.0. So let me deploy version 2.0. pi bin deploy, side by side. vi side by side. I'm changing the version to 2.0. App version 2.0. Alright, 2.0. Now deploy it. Now once you deploy 2.0, the 1.0 will become retired state. So you can reload it. You see this one? This retired because there were no existing users. If there are currently existing users, you will see both of them as active. Active means it was active with old users. This was active with new users. But once either the retired timeout reached or all the old users disconnected, it will move into retired state. So in this case, you have version 1.0, 2.0. Once this is retired, you are pretty much ready to delete it. Which version application try to pick? It won't try to pick anything. It depends on the session. Whether you're connected after the deployment of 2.0 or you are before that. You are before that, you are old user, so old version 1.0. If you are connected after 2.0 deployment, you will always get 2.0. Alright, that's side-by-side deployment. Apart from that, there are some things called startup shutdown classes. This is a small one. Startup shutdown classes are basically classes that get executed when the server is coming up. The same way, classes that get executed when the server is going down. And sometimes what happens is, especially let's say a monitoring script, and if there is a monitoring class, you want that class to be loaded into the JVM before anything happens on your JVM or before any other class loads in, so that you can monitor it. The same way, when you shut down a server, you want some temporary files to be cleaned up, and you have written a Java class file to do that. So whenever you shut down the server, you want that class to be executed. So that class can be configured as a shutdown class, and WebLogic will execute that, instantiate that class when it is coming down. So startup shutdown classes are usually used in some projects, not all of them. In some projects where you want to do some things before the application gets loaded, or you want to do some things before shutting down the server. So startup and shutdown classes are easy implementations where a predefined activity can be done. Or else, let's say you want to send out an alert when you shut down a server. So the alert, let's say alert mechanism is written in Java. You have a class, then you basically set it as a shutdown class. You won't see them in all the projects, but some of the projects where the developers especially know about WebLogic properties, they will use this WebLogic property startup shutdown classes. And you can create shutdown startup classes easily by going into environment, startup shutdown classes. You create a new class, what type of class it is, whether it's startup or shutdown. Move on to next. You give a name. Alright, let's say we call it ABC, and the location. Now this class name, whatever you give, will be searched in the class path. So you will get a jar file from the developer, and then the developer is also going to tell you what is the class name in that jar file. Let's say abc.xyz. So you will attach the jar file to the class path, and how you do that? You will do it from the set domain env again. So set domain env, go to the end of it, you will find a class path. You see this thing? You're going to set your class path here. So it's called pre-class path, class path, and post-class path. So you will add your class path here. Means the jar file will be added to the class path in the set domain env. It looks daunting here, this entire script, but it's not really that difficult. There is a pre-class path, which is this. Then there is a class path separator, which is a colon, and then there is a class path. You can simply add a colon here. Alright, this is what you do. You add a colon here, alright, and give the location. Let's say home encode it my jar file, the one that you got from a developer. Alright, you simply add it and save it, close it. I did not save it. So once you've added, the class path is having the jar file, and you are defining the class inside that jar as a startup class. So this class will get executed when the server is coming up. So you can target it to any server you want. Finish it, so your startup class is ready. The same way you can create a shutdown class. The shutdown class will come up again. Alright. So startup and shutdown classes are basically simple mechanisms to execute something at the beginning, execute something at the end of your server startup shutdown. Some of the projects you may see these startup shutdown classes. Alright, that's your entire deployment and various types of deployment. We have covered pretty much everything in deployment. So in terms of theory, in terms of practice, so you should be pretty comfortable with deployment now. Any questions in the meantime? Any questions? Okay, if you don't have any questions, you can log off. Make sure you practice this entire deployment, especially with WebLogic.deploy. That's really important. You get a hang of it just once or twice, but it should not take you more than 30 minutes. Just keep the video with you and you should be able to. Can we forcefully undeploy? No, you can't do that. You have to undeploy all of them. You have to undeploy all the applications. You can't undeploy 2.0. You can undeploy. What's wrong? Why you want to do that? You can undeploy any version. Yes, that's possible. 2.0 can be undeployed. 1.0 can be undeployed. See, the idea of side-by-side deployment is not to kick off the users. If there are problems in 1.0 retiring process, why should you worry? As an administrator or as a system owner, why should you worry if there is problem with 1.0 retiring? Because 2.0 is already on. If the user has a problem, all that the user has to do is disconnect and start a fresh connection, in which case the user will go to 2.0. No, we're not going to cover that one, Srinivas. That will be part of your RC scripts. You need a system administrator, especially to put it into their run control scripts. A run control script will take care of starting, but that's not really difficult. If you want such a mechanism, I can give you a document. You can do that. But I don't think you really want that kind of setup. Especially you will require such a setup on a Veritas cluster, not on a regular machine. But if you need it, if your environment requires such a setup, we can definitely do that. I'll give you a document. It simply adds a couple of lines to a RC script, a run control script. Alright, that will execute the start mng1.sh and start admin.sh. It's not that difficult. We can get a document to do that. That's not a problem. Any other questions? Okay guys, if you don't have any questions, you can disconnect. I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll be talking about clustering. That's very important, tomorrow's session. So make sure you don't miss it. Clustering is what we're going to talk about. Alright, I'll see you tomorrow, same time. Thank you. Srinivas, you're there?